This is Alex Sanfilippo, and you are watching the Break It Down Show.
Man, thank you for coming on this show. I know we have our affinity for each other. I love what you're doing. I love the look. It's so damn hard out there in the world for podcast folks, and I'm saying podcasters. I mean, live streamers, gamers, anybody who's trying to gather an audience. And look, it's not that I wear many hats. It's that I own a hat store, and I know you have to feel the hat store thing. It's like 2 hats. Oh, you're an adorable little baby. There's 5,000 hats that I have to wear. All of them, development, future ops, current op, all these things. So I appreciate what you're trying to do. I appreciate you. I appreciate your wife, everybody in your organization. It's great. Look, we were talking off mic a little bit. Like, it's hard to solve these problems. And so you got to shoot straight to the problem, but there's also a lot of richness in what you do. So thanks for coming on the show. Let's talk about PodMatch and everything you guys are doing.
Sounds good, man. Hey, and real quick, I got to say this. Thanks for paving the way for guys like me. Like, you've done this a lot longer than I've been in the space, and you've got the reputation and just the giftedness. I'm a listener, viewer of your show, and man, I just thank you. Like, it's an honor to be in this seat. So I really appreciate it.
Likewise. I wish I could have figured out how to do what you've done, in your version of it, my version of it. At one point, before crypto was really a big thing, I realized that you could incentivize consumption several ways with some kind of a token, right? And so I was trying to get somebody to help me build a business around this, but you have to have all the partners in place to pull the trigger. And so the idea is incentivize, like, reward you for listening, reward you for your location, and all these little things. So like if I'm running a GameStop ad and you're listening to my show in GameStop, you're going to get a higher level of discount than you would otherwise. And so you're incentivizing consumption. And I can see like things like that come. You're doing a similar thing where you're incentivizing participation. Let's talk a little bit about that, because it's one thing to like help people with the podcast. It's another thing to throw a little bit of money back in their pocket.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you had like the idea of like some sort of crypto-esque thing. Dude, it took me so long to figure out what that was. Like, I must have listened to Bitcoin explained 100 times. I'm like, I still don't get it, right? But eventually I got it. Now I'm like, dang, that was brilliant. But if you would have presented that to me 10 years ago, I'd be like, huh? So good for you having some foresight, maybe a little before your time. But yeah, man, like one of the things that we really wanted to do when I got into this space is put money back in the hands of independent creators. I just realized in the creator economy, me like being a blogger before podcasting was a thing, stepping into podcasting, like there's a cost involved in it. And I guess that's fine. Law of buy-in is a great thing. But at the same time, I'm like, man, it's like, it can be very unrewarding, especially for like a newer independent podcaster as a passion, a purpose for what they do. And everyone's like, give me this money, give me this money, give me this money. And eventually you're like, okay, my spouse is going to get angry because I'm spending $80 a month now. Right. And I
only 80.
Right. I was being conservative. Somebody's brand new. Yeah. But I can remember sitting with my wife and I was like, man, is there any way we could pay people who use our platform? And she was like, how would that work? And I can remember it was me, my wife, Alicia, is my business partner, and our other business partner. We were like, just kind of thinking about it. And man, I don't know what it was. One day I was like, there's a way to do this. And we figured it out. And it's not a lot of money. So I don't want people to think that like podmatch.com is going to get you rich if you're a podcast host. The end goal of it is, can we help offset all of your production costs? Keeping in mind that it's probably a small show, so you don't have like a studio or a team of huge people, right? But could we somehow offset that? That was really the whole vision behind it. And we're on our way to being able to do that. We're getting closer all the time. Actually, it's my first announcement of it. It's not public yet, but we just started paying podcasters a little bit more. So we just bumped it up. The average went up about, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was just under 10% that we're paying podcasters on average now.
One of the things that's cool about what you're doing is, one, you're gathering producers, hosts, and guests. And I'm putting producers and hosts as different people because I might run 5 shows, right? And so I need tools for that. And within that, you guys are developing more tools. Let's for sure talk about that. But what you're not being is Patreon. And one of my challenges, like, people are like, why don't you get on Patreon? And I'm like, I don't need Patreon. I've got a PayPal account. All you've got to do is chip money. By the way, anybody watching, there goes the link right there. You can go to breakitdownshow.com, hit that PayPal link. $5 a month goes a long way around here. But so one, they have a political problem at Patreon where they're like, hey, we've changed our mind on what we're going to allow. And we're going to get between you and your audience and make changes and ban. Oh my God. Like you can't run a business like that. Like, you're my business partner in this. I for sure, I pay PodMatch right now to use your guys' services. If you were to come in and change the rules, Or if you were to come in, here's the thing that really happens on Patreon. They're like, hey, you watch Pete's podcast. Why don't you watch Alex's podcast? Better yet, why don't you listen to Jeff's music? Have you seen Chris's comedy? And they're like pulling my audience away in these different spots. And then what they do is they say, hey, we have all these 15 million, 100 million, however many people clicks this month. They're pimping my audience to their investors to get money. And it doesn't work because they're trying to build audience. So am I. Help me build audience. Help me reduce my work stack, which is what you guys do. And so when I look at Patreon and what you guys do, there's much more value in what you guys do because you're leaving me alone when I want to be left alone. And you're trying to help solve problems for me through automation, which I love. And now you're trying to put a little bit of money back in my pocket. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's interesting you brought up this whole point because I think that we've seen a lot of that happen in software spaces where somebody involved high up is like, I don't want this anymore. And they just send that down through the whole organization. They kick people off and stuff. And one of the things that we devoted not to do, and people all the time are like, hey, you guys should be a hosting provider as well. And I just decided early on, like, that gives us too much control. Like, I think that everyone's control should be limited so that I don't choose. I don't have a say in who's getting paid and who's not. Like, I don't. Now, granted, if somebody joins the platform and they're being an awful human being to everybody, like we do reserve the right to remove them. But I don't want to also have control of their show or other elements of it. So we've kind of purposely limited ourselves to not be overly powerful. And I think that's something that creators on like podcasters, video, anyone like who's creating online, we have to be careful of how much power we give one person over what we do. And so I'm not saying like have a very diverse suite necessarily, but at the same time, like you might not want the one size fits all solution where it's like, this is my everything, right? Because I'd just be worried if someone's like, you know what, Pete, I don't like you anymore. We're going to delete you. And you're like, well, everything I do is run through you. That's a problem, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm really careful with the power stuff. And I think that there's like a bit of a power trip in software these days. And I personally, I don't have much of an ego in this. So I just don't like seeing that. It kind of bothers me a little bit.
There's you meet the bar for one of my requirements for working with someone. And you've probably heard me complain about this because I'll be direct about what I don't like about something. If I have a question, I can email you or your wife, or either one of you guys picks up in a fairly timely fashion. If YouTube ghosted my show, I'd have no recourse other than to find a YouTuber that had the connections to allow me to talk to someone and say, what the fuck happened? Only to have them go, oh no, it was an accident, right? And so I cannot reliably get into business with somebody if I can't reach them. Like I'm about to fire X, not because I don't think it's valuable, but because when there's a problem, there's nobody to talk to. And so how do I establish it? Who would establish a business with a partner like that?
I don't know, man. I don't get like, I can't imagine not responding. Like that blows my mind. And I know some other software, like, yeah, we just ignore the stuff that comes through. I'm like, how do you have a business? Like, I don't understand. Right. Like, but also, man, like I'm like, you and I've become friends over the years since we kind of first met. And one of the things I really, by the way, respect about you is a total side note, but like you're one, just a good guy, but two, you just give it to me straight, like a true friend would. And I've always like immediately was like, I'm friends with Pete because he tells me the truth. And I like that stuff. And so for me, when it comes to the communication, man, I just like people too much. And maybe that means I'm not a good software guy, but I like to talk to people. And I will do my best to never not be in the inbox. As a matter of fact, it's only me, Alicia, and Jesse who are in the inbox. We have no one else who has access to it. Not because we're the three founders that want to have all the control, but we're like, we want to build a business that we enjoy the people we work with. So we're going to be the ones that talk to them. I'd hate to meet you in person and have never actually talked to you. It was like a virtual assistant who was acting like me, right? Like, I don't want that. That seems like icky to me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and don't act like you care when you don't. You know,
yes,
right now, and this is 100% true. I cannot get paid by YouTube, not because I don't earn money, not because they don't have my money, but they can't figure out how to drill a hole between me and my money. And I try and they're like, try this article. Did it help you? Like, no, there's no money in my account like this. I don't know how much money it is. It's a lot of money just sitting there that I can't access because I can't navigate how the hell do I get paid? And whatever ponderous process, whatever button I haven't pushed or they've invented that I didn't know so I couldn't, who knows? But that doesn't make me want to do business with YouTube. And again, you and I are talking, and I can be critical, and I can say something like this. By the way, when you put things out and I'm paying attention, I started publishing my podcast back on podcast channels again because you're like, hey, dummy, not to be dummy, but dummy in general. Like this is what I heard. why aren't you putting your show on podcast channels? And I'm like, yeah, I should do that again. Because for a while, I'm like, it's not worth the money because I was paying to have it produced, but it's gotten easier to do now. I'm a little less demanding on it. And so I'm publishing. And sure enough, I'm getting hits at a very good rate, and it's wonderful. And so you put information out all the time that I see and I digest. And even though I've been around doing it a long time, I'm not so stubborn. I'm stubborn in a lot of ways, but I'm not so stubborn that I can't go, let me relook at that. Let me rethink this. Let me see if there's something that helps me or my clients with the shows that I produce.
Yeah, man, I respect about you again. Like you've kind of paved the way for guys like me. But I can remember that conversation. I'm like, Pete's gonna hate me. And you're like, cool, it seems like a smart idea. I'm like, look at this guy. Still has some level of humility in there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've made all the mistakes. I think I say it every time and I've been meaning to do one of your things for you guys. You have these wonderful talks too, by the way. So, which by the way, I learned from those. I don't listen to all of them because some of them for me, they're behind me, right?
Of course.
But there's a lot of them like, oh, that's interesting. How are they doing that? Like the monetization thing. We're always interested in that. And I want to get into beginner stuff, but I want to talk about people who are mid-show or about to break through. And we always get these questions about monetization. And I'm pretty frank about that. Like you have to be worth listening to. You have to be worth pulling money out of your pocket for somebody else to monetize. You don't just get to start and say, I've got 6 episodes I'd like to monetize now. Like that's not realistic. Maybe you can make some money. Maybe you can go out and sell an ad, but who are you driving to that product? And so it's very difficult to make money. And folks, gosh, I always like to point the dragons out when it comes to podcasting. So what are the dragons that you're trying to slay for the mid-tier, emerging mid-tier, and people who are senior and trying to get, even bigger still?
Yeah, the first thing, so PodMatch doesn't really help with that. And so I like to be fully transparent. Like we help no matter where you are in podcasting, beginner, intermediate, advanced, like it can help offset your production costs because that's what it was made for. It's not going to get anybody rich. Like PodMatch has made 0 millionaires. So it's like, but I like that to be known because that's, we know we can do that small part to help. And for somebody who's maybe not monetized any other way, even if they're an advanced podcaster doing really well, this again kind of gives them that foundation, which I think is important. Like if you're starting a business, you're not like, if I'm not making $1 million a year, I'm not doing it. You're like, no, how do I break even? Like, how do I get out of the red and into the black? Like, that's what we want to help people do faster. But when I start thinking about monetization, I think of these that mid-tier that we're talking about here. They've kind of worked out the kinks. Their show, the production's doing really well. The content's good. Like they've kind of found their footing. And I find that's where a lot of people decide to give up because they're like, well, I kind of am doing everything everyone says to do, but I'm not making money because the show's not big enough, so I can't run ads. And I'm always kind of, not that I'm against ads, but I'm like, well, if you're doing all those things, maybe the niche is just not big enough for you to go that route. Like maybe there's something else you need to do. And the first place I always tell these individuals to start, I'm like, if you can talk to your listeners, if you can't do that yet, find a way to talk to them, right? But talk to them and find out, what are they struggling with? Like, why do they listen to you? And for many people, they're just like, okay, they all said this. I'm like, great. Is there a product or service in there you can offer? If they're all listening to you because of X, can you offer them Y to get them Z? Which I'm definitely oversimplifying that a little bit, but I'm like, man, that's a more profitable strategy than necessarily even just running ads or finding a sponsor. Again, I have nothing against those things. That actually works for a lot of people that have done really well. But if you're like, this just isn't going to work for me unless I get 1 million more people listening this month, that to me seems more unrealistic than you saying, you know what, I'm going to launch a product or service based off what my listeners say that they're looking for. I've seen that work even better than almost anything for a lot of people.
There's plenty of niches out there and there's plenty of people listening to things, but you are also competing with, I'll just say like Jason Bateman, I mean, all kinds of people, Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, these are all people.
Pete Turner. The space. Come on.
Absolutely. Right. And my people, so let's just use me. My people love me. They are my friends. I know almost every single person, who listened for a long time. And the new people, I get to know them too. I have people all in my life all the time. Right. And so now imagine if it was like someone like, and this is not a political statement, but Tucker Carlson, a lot of people listen to him. So millions of people listen to this dude. And so what are you going to do to pry those ear and eyeballs away from Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, all these different people that have millions of fans? If you have 10,000s of people like I do, okay, maybe we can compete a little bit. Maybe people get fatigued from my show and they come back and it's been 2 years or whatever, but it is really competitive and still plenty of niches, plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, when I think about that, people might listen to those shows, but why? I always go back to like strategic level. Like, why are they listening to it? Not
Right.
that you want to convince them not to. But it's like, okay, what is it that they're looking for from that show, and what gaps is that show missing that they're then going to go look up, right? For many of us, even if we watch a movie that's a documentary, I mean, I do this every time I watch a documentary. As soon as the movie's over, I go straight to a search engine to get all my questions answered. And so it's basically like, hey, if you are trying to build something similar to that, what is everyone going to Google for right after they listen to that person? Right? Are they like, well, how do you actually do this? Right? And it's like, okay, maybe I need like a podcast that's gonna have a smaller group of people, but the ones that are actually asking, how do I implement? Right. And that's kind of an extreme example, but like to me, it's like, okay, well, you use Tucker Carlson as an example, so I'll use him as well. He already exists. So how do I be me to solve maybe the next level what those people are looking for? Someone who's similar, but just can't get on board with his energy, right? But want to know kind of the same stuff, right? Like, how do I uniquely offer that as well? So I think that positioning is huge, because the better that you find the way that you show up to serve, the better you are at asking the question, what are you struggling with as a listener? How can I help you in creating that product or service? Like, I think those things tie together like more than we might realize.
I want to get to another part of this, but one of the things I usually advise people, one is just don't start a podcast. It's very hard. It's like a small business with no real hope of making any kind of real money right away. I mean, that's just the truth. Yet it is worth your time. And I don't care about your idea. I care about your work ethic. Can you stay on this thing? So when you have made it so that you're covering most of your production costs, you know how to invest money, you're tough enough to get through 100 shows, now maybe you have something, but you still don't know where you're going to go. Is your money going to come from ads? Most of my money comes through a project, or someone will say, Pete, I see you working hard. I wanted to throw a check at you, and they'll throw me a check. And I'm like, oh, cow. It's just in the blind, planting seeds, creating value, right? And so if you're creating value, Pete thinks that over time, you will start to extract value, whether it's cash, wonderful relationships, opportunities to travel. I rarely have to pay for travel. Usually someone's like, Pete, come out this way. And I'm like, great. And they're like, and let me buy you gas, or let me buy a plane ticket. And so I get paid to go somewhere, or tell us about podcasts, or whatever it is. And so a lot of my emotion that people see is because someone else is saying, come out here and let's exchange value. Teach us how to be, consistent. Teach us how to look. The production side of things, it's easy. I know how to do all that, right? What you're paying me for is the fact that I do it and do it and do it and do it. So I've got these clients that are lined up, and we're talking about shows, and I'm still trying to talk them out of it, because I'm like, hey, this costs money. This takes time. And if you don't have these resources, how do we find them? And if you don't have them, I want you to do something else, because maybe you just need to spend money on PR and not on a podcast, because it's wonderful. It's life-changing, but if you don't need your life changed and you don't need to spend $10,000, then let's do something else.
I think that's really wise advice. At one point I posted something where I can't remember the exact stat, but basically I looked at as an entrepreneur in the United States, like your success and failure rate and the success and failure rate in podcasting. And I think it was something around the lines of you're 4 times more likely to fail at a podcast. Granted, they are different, so it's not necessarily apples to apples, but the reality is, I'm like, if you're starting a podcast because you want to build a business, you want to make money, skip the podcast and go start the business, because you're more or less, like you said, Pete, you're building 2 businesses, and you've got to have a sustainable model if you're planning on doing that. Now, an existing business, or if you could truly prove that this is going to be like your main funnel for your business, then by all means do it. But I'm with you, Pete. Like, when people are like, I'm doing this, I'm going to get into it for the money, I got this idea here, I'm like, man, maybe skip it, right? Like, maybe don't. But you, if people won't relent, they want to do it, that to me says, okay, they might actually stick with it. Let's do it, right? But you want to talk them out of it before you let them do it.
Yeah.
Just like your best friend's getting married, right? You want to talk them out of it to make sure they're not going to get right out of it.
I've had those conversations. It's hilarious. I'm not going to go any further. You also offer the other end of it, where you're like, maybe you just need to be a guest. Maybe you just need to trade your knowledge on other people's podcasts and sit down and look. I've spent money on PR. I wish I had more money to spend on PR, because it works, but boy, it is costly to access someone else's address book and have them manage all these things for you. So you guys have this PR aspect that I love about what you're doing, because anytime I want more exposure, I can get in, I can go, and I can get on shows reliably. And that is wonderful to me. That's probably, for me, for Pete specifically, that is the most valuable thing you guys offer me.
That's good. Good to know. I wanted to make sure we had a spot for guests, like people that are just being guests on shows, because for many people that makes more sense. And I'll never forget it. Are you familiar with SMS marketing, like text message marketing? You heard the term? Yeah, I didn't know anything about it just a few years ago, and I decided to look up some companies. Sure enough, there was companies that do it. So I went to my podcast app and I was like SMS marketing, text message marketing, like all those type of things. And so I went on there and I found one person who was like, I think the CMO of one of these companies that I had looked up. And he was going on all kinds of podcasts and just like giving it all away, sharing like the greatest knowledge ever. I went and signed up with their company and paid them because I heard this guy teaching me how to succeed with his product. Like that's the power of podcast guesting, like simply put.
The power of guesting well, and also the power of, if you're going to have a podcast, it doesn't have to make money. Again, are you creating value for you, for your company, whatever it's going to be for somebody else? It can simply be a networking tool. Same thing with guesting. I'm just going to get on things. I'm going to be great with people. I'm going to learn how to be a great guest so that I get called back, so I get passed around to other shows, because everybody's looking for great guests. And so if you have the right kind of energy, the right kind of knowledge, well, you can just and that will turn into opportunities. You may not be able to look. First off, this is just a big Pete tip: don't do affiliate marketing. Like, it's just, you don't need to sell mattresses. Go to a place that needs leads and say, I will generate leads for you, but you're going to pay me $150 a month. And if you start bringing in business, raise your rate. But that whole thing of, I'm going to turn this thing into an awareness machine, a networking machine, a marketing machine where I'm going to market my pizza culture, because I've been a cultural consultant in the past. I'm just going to talk about that. And that's how I'm going to generate my leads. And it's going to have nothing to do with my show. And so I'm just talking about the edges of this. There's so many deeper things. Like if I said to you, Alex, who are your 10 dream clients? And you're like, IBM, Hewlett Packard, I'm just making up companies, right? All these big companies. I'm like, well, why don't I go out and book the highest level person in IBM that I can and bring you on my show, and you'll sit right seat with me. And now you have a soft opening to your dream client. And if I did that and you started reliably getting meetings, I guarantee you I'm going to get money out of that.
Right. Man, what you're getting into, I call this the hidden value of podcasting. Like, it's like, what's the price tag for me to get a meeting with that person? Like, how could I possibly, but you have the podcast, you have the platform, you've now given me an introduction that I'd otherwise legitimately never be able to get. I'm not selling myself short. And to your mattress point, my brother is really into Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played it, but like I am familiar enough. I know that they have like really fancy dice that you roll. It goes on this game. And there's the ones that come in the box, I imagine. And then there's these huge upgrade ones that get into like the hundreds of dollars. If you have a Dungeons and Dragons podcast and you're like, but I really want this idea of a sponsor or something like that, don't make it a mattress company. Go to Etsy, where these expensive dice are, and tell the person who's doing a really good job of selling, hey, I want to sell your dice through my podcast. I want this commission. I want you to pay me this much to be on it. Like, that is perfectly aligned. And people that are listening to you talk about Dungeons and Dragons, they want that really premium dice to be able to roll. Right. And so, like, again, like the hidden value of podcasting, it's like, man, if you're in a niche like that, or you can introduce me to somebody at IBM, like that stuff, it's hard to even put a price point on the value and how far that type of thing can go.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that's happened for me is because of my networking, I've learned how to bridge the gap between a writer who writes, we've got a bunch of books here from all these different authors who come on the show. Because like you, I'll watch something or I'll read something or I'll hear about something and I'm like, I'm going to get that person on my show. Because of my level of experience now, I can reliably get those people. Can I get all of them? No, but I've got more than I can get. So it doesn't matter. I've got plenty. And then I take that person and I'm like, hey, what's the deal with the rights on your project, on your book, on your whatever it's going to be? Like, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how about I introduce you to some producers, or you and I work to prove up your idea and see if it'll bridge over to a different media. And here's the thing is the producers that I know now are like, hey, Pete, what do you got in this area? And they're asking me, and we haven't, like, I'm making things, right? And so, this is like, these things are being made. They are more made than they were 6 months ago. And in 6 more months, they're still not going to be made, but there will be more things there. It's like a project car. But I've got people asking me now for ideas and contacts on different projects, which is now allowing me now to be able to go back to the creators and say, hey, I'd love to have you come on. I'd love to talk about your book. And by the way, I know a lot of producers, so maybe we can work something out in the future. And I never knew that was going to happen. It's one thing I encourage new people, like, don't limit what your show can become, because mine has become a dream factory. And it kind of built itself. It's like a transformer. I thought we were going to sell things on Amazon and talk to comedians when we started this thing. It's nothing like that now.
Things have evolved, haven't they? Oh, yeah. Man, like what you're talking about to me, like you've done this a lot and you've been on both sides of the microphone a lot. So this may not be true for you. But for most of us, myself included, what we're doing right now is what I would consider a meaningful experience. Like, I'm never going to forget you because we had this time together. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, like friendship, relationships, they're built on meaningful experience. Example, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where it's super flat. But the few times I have driven up north to where there's whitewater rafting, I will never forget my few whitewater rafting adventures, nor who I was with when I was in them. And so for me, this is like that same type of experience. And so when you call me and you're like, hey, man, I got this project that I think you're the right fit for, I'm like, I'm in. You and I, like, we have that baseline done. Like, yeah, what do you need from me? Like, if I am a good fit, let's make it happen. And I think that if it was just like out of the blue, I mean, how often do you get just like the typical emails? Like, I got an opportunity for you. You're like, no, you don't. Like, but once you've shared a room like this, you're like, okay, maybe you do. I'll hear it out a little bit more because you've kind of built that level. Man, that's powerful to me.
My friends and I, we call those at bats. Like, I don't promise you're going to get a hit, but I do promise you're going to get in the batter's box. And if I can make the pitcher throw slow and right across the middle, I'm gonna. Right. And if I think, hey, all you got to do is take 4 pitches, they're going to walk you on purpose and put you on base, you're going to take that. And so that is one of the things that I do. I create a lot of value for the people that I know. I'm like, hey, I don't know if you two will do business, but you're going to know each other now. And I gladly introduce people all the time. I'm not precious with it because we all want opportunities. And sometimes the best way to meet somebody is to be in relation with somebody else who introduces you to somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, interdependence, that's the word I want to use, interdependence. And I relearned that word today because I was listening to your podcast earlier. Charlie Hurt, he wrote a book called Team Leadership Handbook. And by the way, that episode came out on this show right here. Break it down. It came out on January 7th, 2025. When you're done with this, go back and listen to that. And there's the book. He just held up the book. Talks about this idea of interdependence and how, like, what we do as a team matters more than what we do individually. And it's not just the performance, it's also the community aspect. I say all that just to say very little of my achievements in life and in business have come from me. It's the interdependence. It's the people I've built relationships with that, by the way, I'm usually the small fish in a big pond. And there's some bigger fish that have been willing to just be like, hey, man, let me help you out. And so to me, interdependence has been like just a huge part of it. I think that's what we're really voicing here.
Yeah. I know personally, we had a lot of luck and a lot of breaks and a lot of help getting our show off the ground. And we came out roaring with some fantastic guests. And so I always do my best to, like, especially if someone wants to ask questions, like you've on occasion sent people towards me directly. And I'm like, yeah, send them over. And I don't charge people money for that. Like, if we get to the spot where I have to charge them money, I'll let them know, like, hey, listen, at some point, if we get much further past this in the advice realm, I'm going to have to start charging you, and I don't want to do that. So you let me know if you want to do that. But, and so we have these agreements, but most of the things I talk about are free because I want folks to actually take the stab at it. It's hard. I'm going to say it's hard, but yeah, what do you need help with? Oh no, you're worried about too much about that. Don't worry about the microphone. Just worry about, can you put a show out each week? See if you can do that. And those are the kind of things that I think create a real connection for somebody. Often enough that's how I like to do things because it seems to work.
Yeah. I think that the way that you speak about that, I think, by the way, works really well. Like, I like the fact that you lead with that. I'm leading a shirt that says this, and I say it all the time. That's why it's on a shirt. Sorry, but you lead with value a lot. I didn't mean for that to be like showing off my shirt. Yeah. It's not for sale, by the way. But you lead with value a lot. You show up and you try to see, can you actually do this at the commitment level you say you're going to do? Cool. Then we can work on the rest. And I think in the creator economy in general, we look too much at the opposite. I need the fancy mic, the fancy lights, got to get it all done right first, and then I'll see if I can do it. It's like, no, can you actually do it? Like, first, let's put it to the test. Can you do it? And then we'll get you fitted for your jersey, right? If you can catch the ball, right, then we'll see if the jersey fits you.
Yeah, and I'd like to call it the practical advocate. So instead of devil's advocate's got a place, and everybody understands that role, but the practical advocate's like, hey, can you dedicate 10 hours a week to doing this? Not a chance. I'm like, well, then that's where your work is, right there. If you got to find your 10 hours, maybe you got to buy 8 of them. And so you're going to pay me however much money that is, right? And I'm glad to see you succeed and let you have a deal, right? But it is going to cost you X $100 to do 8 hours of my work, right? So all these things kind of go into the process of understanding what is the pile of work that you're trying to attack. And this is where guys like you and I can come in and say, hey, when you signed up for PodMatch, it's like, here's what you have to do. You're great about this. Lay it out. Like, most of you won't finish this process, but this is here, and here's how many of these you need to do. And if you don't do that, well, it's not that you can't do it. It's just that's the capacity you have to build or fund or find.
I think the biggest thing that people are missing in the entire creator economy, so I'm going beyond podcasting, beyond YouTube, beyond blogging, like everything, is our endurance, our willingness to stay consistent and stick with it. And again, like I had, for everyone checking this out, I had Pete on my show to talk about that. Like, and it was popular, but some people also like were very discouraged by it because they're like, well, I don't. I'm like, well, then you should be thanking Pete because it means that like you were already going to fail. Like, and he just told you that you were going to, right? Like, but some people are like, you know what, I'm committed, I'm going to do it. But I think that's the biggest thing missing. Like, if you look at some of the greatest creators, they very few of them became successful overnight. We might think they did because we found out about them overnight, right? But the reality is they've been consistently creating in the background for longer than many of us are willing to. And I always go to football as my example, man. I use Jerry Rice because he has that quote, which he says, like, today I will do others won't, so tomorrow I'll have what others can't. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but like no one knew who this guy was until he was in the NFL. But you best believe since the time he could walk, he was catching a football. His dad was throwing a football. His mom was throwing a football. Like they were doing all the way through, but no one cared about that. They're like, he's the greatest ever live. I'm like, yeah, it's because he put in the time, the energy. Yeah. And I just think I don't see enough of that online. We go 1 foot in, we're like, it didn't work for me. I'm like, well, you didn't actually get a proper try to see if it would work. Yeah. I'm preaching the choir here, by the way. You know, like
I mean, you are. And I was just I was thinking about what are the things that Jerry Rice does. And so this is the competition thing, right? So Jerry Rice would catch a ball in practice and try to take it to the house every single time he touched the ball. And his teammates are like, why are you doing that? He's like, because that's how you get into the end zone. Right. And so it became the standard. The Niners were just in fantastic shape. So late in the game when everybody's tired, these guys have been running 80-yard sprints, 60 yards all year long, and they were just in great shape because of the mental attitude. They built that success earlier in the year. And so a lot of this stuff, it just comes in like you don't have to hit a home run every show. Like, let's say this show is just a solid, using baseball analogies. Maybe it's a solid double or something like that. We're both excited. I like the vibes. I can pull some pieces out. Great. If I did that 100 times, I'm successful and one of the greatest shows of all time, right? Like 100 shows and they come out with this kind of energy, forget about it. All I've got to do is keep doing that, right? And so if I don't love it enough to do it, or whatever it is can change, by the way. So maybe that idea died because you just weren't ready, or you weren't mentally tough enough, or you didn't have the right partner, whatever it is, right? But if you can get past that, I use swimming as the example. I think you've heard me do this. Like if you said you came to me and said, Pete, I want to learn how to do 200-meter butterfly. And I'm like, wow, how much swimming are you prepared to do? You know, because you can't just go to the gym and have big biceps and triceps. You have to work, and you can't ever be that guy because that guy's already there. You have to be who you were going to be, and you might have to change coaches, and you might have to buy software, and you might have to break equipment and all these things to get to where you think you want to be.
Man, you know, all I can think of, do you remember the old movie, I think it was a documentary, Pumping Iron, Arnold Schwarzenegger? Yeah. See that? Yeah. At one point he's talking to, I can't remember which guy he's talking to, but it was like the second best guy, and they're like eating together, and he's like, man, you're doing really good. This is Arnold talking to him, and he's like, in a year from now, you're going to be where I am. He goes, but just imagine where I'm going to be in a year from now. And I was like, man, those mind games, you know, but that's what that immediately reminded me of. It's like, man, you got to start today because like, yeah, there is going to be competition in any space you get in. Like run your own race, please. But like, just don't think you're going to get there without the work. And, but the thing is, the work is really rewarding. Like nothing I've done in this space, I shouldn't say nothing. Most of what I've done in the podcast space has not come easy. There's a few things that are just maybe my area of giftedness, which I call it giftedness, was probably learned over a former career that I had, right? Sure. That I stepped into, and those things seem to flow really well. But all the things I didn't know have all been struggle. They've been pain. But what gain doesn't come from those things? And I think that, I guess, I mean, I think I already shared it, man, but it comes down to the commitment. Like, are you really going to do it? Like, are you serious, right? Like, that's what we have to really decide if we want to make it in this digital world.
Yeah. And getting started, like, you don't have to swim well. You just have to try to swim. I'll get you across the pool pretty fast. Matter of fact, if you pay me some money, I'll stick with you and get you across the pool 10 times. I'm like, hey, you know how to do this now. You need some more help? Gladly stay, but that costs money. But I will get you moving fast enough. I also will take your idea and be like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? You know, and ask these questions to try to sort out where the problems are, not to kill the show, but to say, these are things that you have to fix if you want to, or buy or improve, whatever it is, to make a thing work. And one of the things that you guys do great at PodMatch is you take a lot of those barriers down. A lot of people ask me, how am I going to get guests? Go to PodMatch, subscribe. I say that all the time. Go to PodMatch, subscribe. You can go right there, and I promise you will find guests. And for those guys who are thinking about that, there's just there's no link, there's no money exchanged here. I'm just telling you, if you want to book guests and aren't sure how to do it, go to PodMatch, sign up, and you'll have guests. There's no doubt about it. And then if you are a show or if you're a guest and you want to do, same thing applies where you get access to all these people. My question to you is how do you grow the client base on the platform so that, because a lot of people I get externally, because I can reach out to some professor, right? And that professor has no business trying to I'm going to guest on 2,000 shows this year because, I just happen to get them because I'm good at it. But if you're someone who's like, I want a greater exposure, how do you get those people on? How do you continue to expand the relevance and the impact of the people who are on PodMatch?
Yeah, so we've done a really good job growing organically. Granted, we have we have organic outreach strategies. So we do a lot of cold email stuff. But I guest on shows a lot. I have my own shows, the educational wing, and we're just doing our best to find what someone's struggling with and put that in front of them. And we've done a very good job of making sure everything somehow leads people to PodMatch, not as a sales funnel. We just want them to see the name. I want you to know that you figured out which microphone to buy because PodMatch, right? Not that I know those answers. Someone else probably did that training, but I want them to see that name so that they just remember it. And once you're in PodMatch, we do our best to I'm really big on retention. And I don't think a lot of people, we're always talking more leads. I'm like, well, if your back door is bigger than your front door is the onboarding and the back door is pressing cancel my subscription button, right? You can market till you're blue in the face. And so for me, I focus more internally than I do externally because I want to know, hey, how can I serve you better? What can we do to improve this thing? And how can we make it better for everybody else? What is it that we need to do? And I'm very active with that, more so than I am even on the organic outreach side, because then when people show up, they mostly stay. And I'm extremely grateful for that level of trust and for people that have come our way. But for me, I just make sure, hey, what can we do to help these people that are already trusting us? And yes, we'll go out and get more. We'll do that through the act of service of helping them get the answers they need. And if we happen to be the solution, great. The last thing I do ever, Pete, is try to convince someone they need PodMatch. I might challenge people's thinking on stuff, but I'm never gonna be like, you're dumb if you don't use it, right? But I will be like, hey, you just said this. Yeah. So why aren't you why not explain it to me? And sometimes people give me an answer. I'm like, you're right. You don't need it. Yeah. Well, the other day I had someone who was signed up and she's like, I've been trying to make PodMatch work for me. She explained her situation. And I said, hey, what I'd like to do is give you your money back and cancel your account. And I was like, I really like you as a person, but I'm telling you, we're not going to be the best fit for you. And she was like, that's so nice. She's like, I really just want to make it work. I'm like, but I don't think it's the right fit. You're going to be pushing too hard. And so again, this whole idea of service first mentality, I think is what's caused our growth to happen, really led to a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. You have Matthew Lesko in your network. Matthew Lesko is great. And a lot of people have seen Matthew Lesko in his work. Ask Lesko. And if you wanted to have a podcast, you wanted to figure out how to get money for it, that's the dude to get. He's the legend at finding money. It's so funny because I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to talk to this guy. And he was one of the first guests that I got through PodMatch recently because I started using the program again. And I was just so thrilled. I don't often get thrilled about that, but he, at least in the 80s and 90s, he was such a big part of your Channel 42 life or whatever channel you're watching that's not a regular channel. And he'd be on there buying time and telling you how you could find money from the government. It was such a great thing. And he's in his 80s now, and he's just such a great dude. Those kind of experience to me, Alex, that's what drives my joy, is having these wonderful chats. The chat with Charlie Hurt that you mentioned earlier, these things, the impact immediately is wonderful because you have this emotional hit. It's great. You talk to someone who gets you. There's another guy named Roy Reed on your platform who talks about culture, and I'm trust, and I'm a super high skilled person in that area. So to have an advanced conversation with someone that's not mundane, it's not tell me your background. It's where is the limit of these boundaries? Oh my God, I could do that all day long, and I don't need to make any money doing that. I just need to have my mind blown or stretch someone else's mind and look at how you and I look at podcasting, and we're not going to agree on everything. And you for sure challenge me all the time whenever we have interactions. I'm like, I got to rethink that. That's good. That's healthy for us. And I think one of the things that's great about podcasts is that you can always find a spot to have your mind blown or to blow somebody else's mind.
Yeah, I think guys like you and I, by the way, like I said earlier, like I consider us friends, and to me, friendship is
Yeah.
like sometimes just challenging each other. Like we're trying to sharpen each other, right, and get better. So you challenge me as much as I challenge you, by the way, which I respect and appreciate.
I always have to apologize. I'm always so like direct about it. That's just the combat guy, man. Like, you have to fix this.
Man, but
Yeah, if
I
I'm,
think it's
if I'm,
rare.
yeah,
It's becoming rare, and I admire it more than I ever have. I think at one
yeah,
point in time when everyone did that, it was like kind of annoying. But now people are just in general a lot more passive, and so it's like a lot of
yeah.
guessing what they want, and you just lay it out straight, man, and nothing. I'm like, you just saved me a ton of time from having to guess. Like you just straight up told me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like one of the things that I don't care for is Calendly, right? And I know like your booking thing kind of uses that kind of a service. That whole service has gotten better. It used to be very restrictive. I need to run my own calendar so that I know what's going to happen and it reliably performs the way I want it to. And my schedule is so fluid that like this isn't a time I normally do a show, but I'll make an exception, right? And so I'm always struggling with something where an automated calendar, it just doesn't suit my purposes. But because I can now book somebody else's calendar and it reflects in mine in the way that it works, like that all has been sorted out by software. And thank goodness for that. That has made that part of my life, especially through PodMatch, a lot easier, where I can reliably do that. I can put my link in. I always send my link again. It doesn't matter to me. But you guys have a wonderful thing where there's the link right there. And StreamYard, by the way, now just let you have one link. It's so good. So
It's
a lot
nice.
of
That's
these
been
little
needed.
things, I know. And so they slowly iterate and get a little bit better and all these things. And you guys are integrating these things, and it really does provide for me a lot of value in terms of saving my time. And I don't look when someone says they're going to save me time. It's like you go to the convention for golf and you walk out, you're like, I'm 80 swings better now because everybody's going to give you a swing at their booth. And that doesn't work. And so the more automation we throw at things, it just means I'm managing more automation. It doesn't mean that I'm being more productive. I'm just doing things that I wouldn't have chosen to do. But you are providing something for me that does help chip off the edges of my pile. You're not going to take 10% out of my work time. There's just no way to do that. You'd have to know me. You'd have to build a thing for me. That's not what you're trying to do. But you do round the edges off. And that for me is helpful.
Man, thinking about that real quick. Do you find that I've said this recently, I've gotten some kickback, but when people are like, hey, do this, do this, do this, I'm like, it's at some point on like all these automations, all these tools you use, like you're hitting copy paste somewhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you ever see like a time when that's not happening? Or is that just like, I don't know how it would. Like, maybe my mind just doesn't go that deep. But when I think about this stuff and the tools, the systems we use, at some point, someone is pressing copy paste to go from one thing to another because not everything is ever going to play nice. Do you have any perspective on this? Because you've seen this evolution further than I have, and you're deeper in it than I am.
So let me just default this by saying I like to try to keep things as human as possible. So I want to run my own calendar is one thing. But I also understand that you don't, right? And so when I work with you on the schedule, we might have a little more engagement than you necessarily want, and I'm going to have less than I want, right? So there's a happy medium there. When I throw down a pitch and I'm writing my email, I write that thing every time. Now I may have the same things that I easily could cut, but I don't do that. I type it out every time. And it takes me, I don't know, 5 minutes sometimes to type one. Maybe it takes me 20 minutes to do a long, fancy one. And it's never long, but it's like those 100 words or so that I give myself. And so I always do that. When I pitch someone on PodMatch, I do not copy and paste anything. I type the thing, and I'm very informal, but that's just what works for me. And again, like, listen, I've made all the mistakes. I've found the things that don't work, and I've trimmed them. I have a little bonsai tree, and it's just a stick now because I've cut all the mistakes off, and it's just as bad. But so I'm very, and if it doesn't work for them, if my informant, it doesn't matter because there are so many people that I can talk. Like I said, I don't want for guests. My show largely books itself, right? And so I have to make time for whoever else I want to talk to. I had a book show up the other day. Matter of fact, Charlie. I didn't ask Charlie. His buddy, we have a combined friend. It's like, you need to go on Pete's show and talk about this. And so book shows up, Charlie shows up, and we do a show, right? And so I didn't book him. When I'm trying to book somebody, I'm looking for something that gives me wonder and fascination, those kind of things. And I guess what I'm saying is when you put the humanity in these things, the humanity tends to stay in it. And so Mike Guardia does reach out to me and say, you need to talk to Charlie Hurt. and have them on your show, because I've layered in that humanity, and it's too easy to do cut and paste because it's easier, right? And so Pete would say, you deny yourself a little bit of human interaction. If I have the budget, I'm going to talk to you face to face. Like if you came to town and you're like, hey, I'm at this convention, I don't care if it's in San Diego or San Francisco, I'm going to come up and see you. Because once you do that, once you get in the room, different things happen, different chemicals happen. It just works better.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Like the humanity in what we do online, I think it's definitely like under attack. An example, I don't know what the plugin is, or if someone's just copy pasting from an AI tool, but I've been getting a lot of responses from people that I can tell there's not actually a human being responding to me. Instead, it's they have this thing read it and then respond for them. They're just copy pasting. Like, why am and the thing is, I'm getting pretty good at reading that and understanding that, but it like kind of hurts my feelings. I'm like, am I not worth having a conversation with? Like why? Like I don't get it. So yeah, I think the human element is it makes you stand out. And the fact that you respond informally, like AI isn't smart enough to do that yet. Like it's going to formalize anything. So people know right away when they see it. At the very least, they know a real person typed that up. And I've gotten to the point now where like I'm a good writer, and sometimes I'll leave typos in. I'm like, well, AI wouldn't do that, so I'll just leave the typo in. I know I've got my E and I backwards, but whatever, it's just going to stay. And not because I'm not trying to be professional, but I'm like, I need people to know that like it's actually human. I didn't just copy paste this from a tool and said, make Pete happy. Here, send it to him, right? Like, we have to be careful that as creators, it's making us stand out more. The guys that are willing to put in human work, we stand out more than we ever have, I'd say.
When I get pitches, so a lot of times I have to trick the naming convention on a program, a site of it. So I have to put Pete space A as my first name, because otherwise I won't be Pete A. Turner, and that screws with my brand and everything. And so when someone sends me a thing, they're like, Pete A. Right. And I'm like, robot, and so instantly not even going to receive your pitch. I didn't ask for it. Now you didn't even give it to me. And so, like I need some humanity in those things. And sometimes I'll respond and say, hey, if you really want to talk to me, you're going to have to call me. Here's my number. And if they don't call me, guess what? We're never going to talk. We're never going to do business. Now, sometimes there's exceptions to that. But for the most part, I need humanity in these things. And I'm not going to let humanity ebb away for convenience for them trying to offer me a service for my money. Like, no, you're going to have to earn it. And I'll tell you, like, it's all a competition to me. Who's bringing me value? Who is helping me put money in my pocket? Who is not taking money out just for some service that they tell me is going to help me? I know how to do my job. I do it already. If you're going to make it faster or easier or something else, you're going to have to convince me, and a robot is not going to do that.
Right. That's well said. I hope someone really takes that to heart. Somebody watching, listening, they need to hear that. So that's good.
Yeah. So, okay, you have the PodMatch thing, you have the guesting portal, you have the production portal for everybody else. What are you going to add? I know you've added the art tool that you just announced, but are you adding other tools or anything on the horizon we can look forward to?
Yeah, we're doing a number of things. Like I mentioned, we did just like raise what we're able to pay hosts, and we'll continue to make that an ongoing goal of ours. Like I want, and here's the thing, like, people want to be like, oh, thanks so much, Alex. The reality is the tools that you're using have gotten more expensive. So we feel like we need to try to keep up with the pace of like prices increasing. And so, yes, I'm glad to help. And I don't mean to downplay what I'm doing, but I'm like, everyone's raising their prices. So the dollar we're giving them needs to be $1.20 now, right? Like, because they can keep on paying for stuff. So that's going to be a huge goal. Beyond that, the other thing that I'm really excited about is we have another tool called Pod Lottery, which is like a fun lottery type system to exchange podcast reviews. We're going to bring that inside of PodMatch and enhance it quite a bit. And I'm really excited about that to help people get reviews. We're going to incorporate the guest side of it as well. So it won't just be hosts exchanging reviews. The guests will be able to get involved as well. And we kind of have like a really unique way of doing that. I'm really excited about that. It's in early testing. We're trying to, by the way, I love Apple Podcasts, but right now we rely heavily on them for part of it. And they're a big organization, and really they're working on some big stuff. They don't really have time to do that. So why it's in testing is because we're trying to see, can we monitor this completely on our own to make it faster for everyone else involved? So that's like that'll be a new fun thing. It's going to go inside of PodMatch. The Pod Lottery will just be brought in. Everyone with an account you won't even notice the difference. At some point, the URL will just change. It'll just pass you right through. But I'm excited to bring that in because I think that exchanging reviews and stuff like that does build a form of community, especially in new podcasts with no reviews going from 1 from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, like that's a very big percentage increase of your total review count. So we're looking forward to being able to do that and connect it again, but not just host, but guest and host. So that's like the next big thing that I think is really exciting on the horizon.
No, that's neat. Yeah. Anything that can help with those hidden metrics that you have to satisfy. Like I've been deleting connections on X because some people are just not active. It doesn't benefit me to have them there. It's just not that I don't like them. And if they're my friends, I pretty much leave them alone if they're there, but I've got to get my ratio right because it's killing my growth. And I'm like, all right, I guess I have to go in. And so it's good to know that you guys are helping create these things. Cause whenever I have a guest on, or I am a guest, I always try to leave a review. And I'm a sucker. I leave 5 stars every time.
Me too.
But yeah, it means a lot though, you know, and when I happen to see one of mine for me, I'm like, oh wow, look at that! You know, and look, it's just such a small thing, but you're like, someone did that. It's like a nice little favor you can do, and so I definitely try to do that. And I don't know, it's anybody in general. You should leave reviews for things. Try not to leave a 0-star review, but 5-star reviews are great. It helps people bring value. I don't know. I'm going to shut up about that. But yeah,
I just think it's nice. Just my mom always told me when I was growing up, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And unless I feel I need to warn people of something, I never leave a bad review. I leave a 5-star. Even if they didn't do like a quote unquote 5-star job, I could say, you know what, this person, I can tell they're really trying. And that's what I'm going to leave a 5-star review on, is the fact that they're trying. And because I want to respect people. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's so I'm going to go to the podcast community in general. I don't do a lot of shows. You probably don't have that luxury. You probably have to do these things. But what am I missing by not going to the different conventions and the different get-togethers? Should I be invested? I mean, tell me honestly, what do you think? Should I be doing these things?
It depends on what you'd want to get out of it. If you want to hang out with cool people like me, right? Then sure, go.
Sure.
I think really the only way it's going to make sense for you is to go to hang out. And to be with people you know. So it'd be like a social club type of thing. I don't see you sitting in sessions, possibly speaking if you like to do that and want to do that. But if you're not into that, then again, it would just go back to the social aspect, which was arguably my favorite part. I don't go and like earn business necessarily. I look for the people I already know, kind of like what I do with PodMatch already. Like I'll talk to somebody new who's there who needs to know about it. Yes, but I really like to speak and I really like the community aspect. To me, that's probably all that at this point you'd get out of it. Now, if someone's brand new, by all means, go. It's like drinking from a fire hose, but it can be good for you if you're new.
Yeah. The new thing to get into that community, to be around people, because most everybody I know in the podcast world, most everybody, it's pretty accessible, especially if you're at a thing like that. We're like, I came here to talk to people, you know, and maybe I'm trying to talk about my thing, you're trying to talk about your thing, but there's room for that, and that's called a conversation, really. But if I was to do it, it would have to be because they wanted me to come out and speak. I haven't really built that business. And so here's the thing, right? Is like, do I want to take the time to build the authority to be able to have someone pay for me to come and stay in a hotel and do that? I don't know, whatever, 10 weekends a year. Gosh, that already sounds like drudgery.
That's the thing. Like, none of this stuff is required. Like, if that doesn't sound good to you, then like, don't do it.
Right. You don't do it. Right.
I really hate like speaking. I get asked to do it all the time. I'm like, just tell them no. Like, no one's forcing you to do it. Right. Like, just say no if you don't like it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And so as I talk to myself about it, I'm talking myself out of it. And really, if I'm going to spend those hours, I should spend them on the things that I think, like these movie projects, right? Like I'd take the time and spend it there, and then let the other opportunities go to somebody else who's needs that, because that's what they love. Because I don't mind speaking, I like it, but do I want to do it for a living all the time? Probably not.
There's this thing I've been telling people, because it happens to a lot of us that have been in the space where people see your consistency, they see you showing up, right? And all the time I get messages and emails, people saying, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. And I have just learned, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but typically opportunity just means distraction. It's just a different word. And so for me, like, I'm not building a speaker business either. And I get asked all the time, people are like, hey, I can help you like get on like 20 stages this year. I'm like, they're like, it's a huge opportunity. I'm like, maybe for someone, but for me, it doesn't feel like it. That feels like distraction based off of my current course. Like I just told my friend Pete that I'm bringing this pod lottery thing into PodMatch. I'm not going to do that if I'm going to be gone 20 weeks of the year, right? Like I'm not. And so I think at some point we'll have to come to terms with the fact of like, if it's not the direction you're going in, these quote unquote opportunities are just distractions in disguise.
Yeah, no, I love that you're talking about this. I think a lot of, everybody talk about their plate being full. No shit, my plate is full. And so when someone who cares about me is like, oh, Pete, why don't you get on whatever Patreon or whatever it's going to be? I'm like, yeah, you know what? My plate's full. If you want to help me. The PayPal link is breakitdownshow.com. Hit the PayPal button and then just put a little bit of money in there. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't need that kind of help. I'm like, so don't assign me. Look, I want to talk to everybody. It's fine. Assign me work. I'm not going to do it because I have enough work already. And that's why everybody can see me doing it, because guess what? My plate is full and I do a lot of work. But that, that sentiment, this is good advice for any young podcast person, is just everybody's going to fill your plate up with things. Try to figure out how to manage your plate. And like you just said, just be able to say, that is a great opportunity, not the direction I'm going. I'm working on this. What do you think? How do you want to help me do that? And know specifically what kind of help you need. I know that if someone puts $5 into my account every month, I'm going to give them a lot of value for that $5. And you can talk to me, you can call me, you can do. I'm not going to invent some stupid subscription thing that I don't really care about. But what I do care about are the people that support me, and I talk to them on the phone, and I go visit them, and all these other things, because they help me get to do what I want to do. And they keep their hands off my plate for the most part. Look, they might say, hey, why don't you try this or get this guest? I don't mind any of that stuff. But managing my plate has been a very professional thing that I had to learn how to do. And I still struggle to do it because the biggest guy to overfill my plate is this guy right here.
Right. There's the saying, and I can't recall who originally said it, but every yes has to be protected by 1,000 no's.
Right.
And to me, it's just like someone just commented that as well. Adam Bird said, it's okay to say no. It's so true. Like managing that plate at some point. Like, have you ever been to like a Brazilian steakhouse? Like, we got a couple of those around here. And you got the little card you flip. If it's green, they keep on bringing stuff. It's okay to flip that to red and just be like, please, this is my plate. It is full and my stomach is almost full already, right? Like, we all have to do that at some point. I think that there's always going to be opportunity and maybe things that we miss, but at the end of the day, like pick your lane and go deep with that and figure out where it takes you before you course correct. And you said it earlier, it doesn't have to be that way forever. At some point, you might be like, you know what? I got this email about speaking opportunities. I think that's what I want to do next. Great. Then it is an opportunity. Go for it. Do it. But today, if you say that's not the direction, then be willing to say no. Keep it off your plate and learn to manage what you have really well.
We're going to run out of time here in a minute. I know how tight you keep your schedule. So what do you want to ask me? What else do you want to get into?
Yeah, man, I wanted to get your perspective on well, I had a lot of things, but I'm just going to go with one here. Again, kind of keeping this idea of creating. Where do you see personally, like the video versus audio side of things going? Like you've for a long time you were audio only,
right?
For a long time you weren't even the audio, like you were video only for a little bit, more or less, right? Like, but where do you see this like this type of content machine going? Like, where's kind of the sweet spot of this thing? And I hope you don't mind. I am going to take notes. So.
No, please take notes. So this is me talking to the industry, not talking from my point of view for me.
Okay.
So I think, it's so easy to syndicate and push out and to pull, have everything doing all this pushing everything. And so you have the ability to blanket the earth in your show, right? But where do you want your audience to be? This is the most important thing to me. Where do you want to build it? Are you going to go build a website that people are going to go to? I keep saying breakitdownshow.com. I don't even really care if people go there or not. It doesn't matter, because it turned out that wasn't a good path to business for me, right? And so we sort of stopped maintaining it. It's still there. It's going to be there. But where do you want your audience to be? Do you want them on X? Do you want them at your website? Do you want them wherever you want them? And I would focus your attention there and build your funnel, not like sales funnel, but just your funnel of people to go like that. And then have that be the source of where you drive your value, if it's that kind of a thing. If it's you, like one of the things I do is I grab my cameras and I go on the road and I'll sit in front of someone face to face with my show. It's very rare to do that. And so that for me is a valuable thing, much more valuable than worrying about selling t-shirts, because I don't want to spend 150 hours a year making shirts and selling shirts to make, I don't know, $250. Like, it's not worth the time. And so what is worth my time? My time is best spent in front of other people, talking to them. And I get to talk to wonderfully famous people. I mean, I've been to some amazing places because I live right by LA and I get to all kinds of things. So I would say, I think video is important compared to audio. There's plenty of room for audio, but I think the video thing is even better when you can be portable and live so that you can give an experience. Do you have to do that? No, but that's where I think people are headed. And like I go to NAMM, it's one of the biggest trade shows in the world. Right down the street from me. It's over 100,000 people. And there's all kinds of 10 years ago, this wasn't the case. 5 years ago, this wasn't the case. But there's all kinds of people with cameras and they're running around doing things. Okay, so while those people are recording something, they're going to go edit. You go do something live, get there faster, set it up. They'll support you at that. And all of a sudden now you're at the music industry's biggest show of the year. Stevie Wonder comes every year. All these incredible people are there. So if you're a music type show, you can be there. Rick Beato, one of the biggest podcasters in the world, right? He is there. I've seen him there. And if I had been going the right way on the escalator, if I didn't have all my gear on my back, I would have hopped over the escalator and gone down and made a real attempt to book him, right? Because it's hard to get him in other ways. You can do that when you have video and you're mobile and willing to go do things. I think there's a lot of ground in just way back when the border crisis was kind of starting, when the Biden administration came in, Vice President Harris was sent down there. She didn't go. So I'm like, I deployed myself. I went down there and I talked to the judge who handles the main response for Del Rio County. I went down there and I talked to that dude and he gave me this wonderful interview, but I had to get in my truck. I had to drive down there. I had to set up my video. And at then I was kind of still new at the whole mobile video thing. And so the audio wasn't perfect. Now I'd be able to nail it. I've got all the bugs worked out. Work out the bugs, figure out how to be mobile, figure out how to go to someone else's house. When I go to fill in the blank incredible musician's house, here's what happens. I go from being the producer and the guy who has a show to their guest. And I've had them say, I had my wife make you her favorite cookies. Do you want some? And now they're hosting me in their house. And I think if you can take something along those lines with video and live and being on the ground somewhere, I think you can outperform most of your peers.
Man, so the big takeaway I got from that is meeting people where they are. Like your audience, you talk about like being, if they're on X, be on X. But you also talk about like you're just be where your people are. Like even that physically means being like, here's my mic, here's my camera, I'm at your front door, right? Like obviously do that invited. But dude, that's really, do we have time for another question or we need to go?
Yeah. I got time.
Oh, good. Okay, just making sure. I don't know how tight you keep this exactly. I want to be respectful. This is not my platform.
No, you're good. Yeah, we can run.
So one of the things I hear in podcasting a lot is this disconnect between a podcast host and their listener. How do they communicate? And I know tools and stuff are changing. Do you have any ideas for simplifying and kind of removing that gap between them so that they can communicate more freely together? The host is like, I don't know where to look. And often I talk to listeners like, well, how do you reach out to a host? Like, is there some sort of formula that you've seen like work really well?
Yeah, I don't know. Cause like, Adam's been chatting. I know Adam. I think you know Adam, so I'll put his quote up, but for the most part, I let those guys contribute and then, but I will follow up with Adam afterwards. Right. And I'll say, hey man, it's good to see you. And I'll probably have him on my show because I love Adam and he's great. And we always have a chat like this too. I think the main thing is this goes back to just put the humanity in that stuff and just let people know like, hey, you can reach out to me legitimately. I'm glad to answer your email, peterbreakitdownshow.com. Now, look, I get busy. I got a lot of emails. Don't be afraid to remind me because you all know my plate is full. So it's okay to say, hey, Pete, I sent you an email a couple of days ago. If you get time, can you get back to me? I am very likely to get back to you after that second, maybe even the third email, because sometimes my intention and my capacity aren't in agreement. But I think something like that, where you're just communicating openly, saying, here's how you fill the gap between you and me is talk to me. Get a hold of me. I'll give you my number. And look, I'm not so big that I can't talk to almost everybody who wants to talk to me, right? If I get to the spot where I have to have someone who minds that, I'm still going to want to help people out who, look, I go to my high school and my buddy's high school every year and I talk to high school students every year. And I don't get paid to do that. I do that because I'm in service of other people. And so I don't know. That's just how I handle those things is put the humanity in it, stay busy, stay positive, put value in it. And I think that's a good way to communicate, but maybe there's some tools that you need to have. I don't know. That's just not an area where I like to have tools between me and the human connection. I'd rather be face to face and ear to ear with somebody. If I say something, call me, and I'm going to answer the phone.
Okay. So what I wrote here is you can reach out to me.
Right.
Like so simple, like email me. And I think that many of us, now that I'm thinking about this, people that have asked me like, well, how do I talk to my listeners? The question I need to be asking them is, how are you telling them to reach out to you? Like, what are you doing? And at the end of the day, like you can reach out to me, like, just don't overcomplicate the process. You're literally like, you can email me. Here it is. might take me a few days. Feel free to remind me. Like now, anyone who wants to, like, who's listening, wants to talk to you, they know how to do it. And you weren't like, go to this website, go to this page, fill in this code, talk to my VA. You were just like, if you want to talk, email me. And so I think the simple solution here is just reach out to me. Like, here's how you can. I think it's kind of like one of those things I wish that I would have thought of it because it's so simple. But I was like, in my head, I'm like, he's gonna have some like system built in. No, just reach out. Dude, I think that's really solid, man. I like that a lot.
There's a couple stories like from my combat time that illustrate this. So one thing is just never borrow the no. Oh, Pete won't talk to me. Like, don't assume that. I might not. I might say I don't got time for that or whatever, right? You might get filtered out. That's absolutely a possibility. Not likely, but it's possible. But if I want to have John Bon Jovi on my show, I'm going to reach out. And if they don't say yes, it's no big deal because we weren't going to have a show anyhow, right? And so if you get to the spot where someone famous won't engage with you, maybe they don't have anything to talk about because these guys don't want to work when they don't want to work, just like you don't. And for them, being on a show is work. And so find a time when, I don't know, pick any famous person when they write a book. Lisa Marie Presley, she's passed on, but her daughter Riley Keough finished her autobiography. If you wanted to get Riley, the time was a couple months back when that book dropped. And almost anybody could get Riley Keough if you do the work to get a hold of her PR people. So you got to talk to PR people. That's part of getting the yes and become normal with those folks. You have to reach directly out to Riley Keough via Instagram or whatever. You don't want to stalk, but you want to like probe and say, how can I find this person? Who do I know who finds that person? So from my combat time, because I was a spy, the unit would come to me and say, hey, Pete, how many schools do we have in this valley, right? And I'd say, well, who's asking the question? Oh, it's the commander from that valley. And I'm like, and who's that commander's contact on the Afghan side? Well, it's, Mr. Zarif. Oh, okay, great. Why doesn't he ask Zarif? Don't ask me, right? Go straight to that's your partner. He has the answers way more than me. And so there's that connection, just like cut the middle things out and just, I'm not saying don't have a VA or whatever else, do all those things, but one of the things I found out is like if you are somewhat famous or even really famous and you want to do something, sometimes you have to ask them because the people in front of them are there to kind of say no, but the person there doesn't know exactly like, oh, you know what, I actually do want to talk. That dude's a veteran. I love veterans. Let me do that show. And so ask directly. That's how I book people. And when people do the same thing, I try to give the same kind of access. Is just ask and see what happens. Write a letter. If you want to get a hold of me, write me a letter. How many times do you get something in the mailbox that makes you smile and go, oh man, and it makes your day? How often does that happen?
Christmas?
Yeah.
Like if you exclude that, like maybe one other time per year, like from one person. That's it.
If someone sent you a wonderfully kind letter, right? Anytime, and they didn't ask for anything, they just said, hey, I saw you on Pete's show. It's wonderful. I just, wanted to say thanks. You would be tickled, right?
For sure. Yes. And I wouldn't throw it away either. Like if you email me that, I would probably be like, thank you. And I like read it a couple times. It's going to go in my refrigerator. I'm just going to be real. Like that's where that ends up.
Right. So if you want to talk to Ice Cube, email or mail him, send him a letter.
Yeah.
He may not respond, right? But he will have a response. He'll open it and be like, holy shit, someone sent me a really nice letter, man, and then that's it. You've done it. And so I think that kind of attitude going out is the same thing. Like I am accessible. Please talk to me. You want to go out to lunch with me if I'm going to be in your area. Now, what I don't want to do is if I travel from here to South Carolina and I'm in Myrtle Beach and you're like, oh, just come over to Columbia. And I'm like, no, I've already come 3,500 miles. Right. You come to me, and so, but that's fine. I still would love to sit down with anybody and have dinner with them. And so that's sort of how I handle comms is keep the humanity in it, be available as much as you can. And when you can't, you say, right now I've got, because there's a lot of times right now I'm in a writing block. And so I'm not going to be talking to anybody because I'm typing. But after that, yeah, sure. Let's talk.
It's good, man. Dude, those are, it's fire, man. You're brilliant, dude. Thank you for answering that stuff. That's great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up?
Man, I think we're good, dude. This was a lot, man. This is some good value for people, man. I learned today, and I believe a lot of people checking this out are also going to, I think a lot of people have a lot of great takeaways from this. So thanks, man.
Yeah. And likewise, I loved chatting with you. I mean, it's just fun to talk to two dudes. I had Robert Greenlee on the show a while back, and it's just amazing. All of these things that we've built and all these people that we get to talk, it really is mind blowing. And I thank you and very much enjoyed this whole thing. You have the last word, and then I'm going to roll the credits.
Yeah, sure. I think that what I want to leave everybody with is that your voice matters. And I think a lot of us like we kind of forget that because there is a lot of noise in the world. But at the end of the day, your voice might be the only one that makes sense to somebody. The best example I can give, I have a close friend, and I've been telling him the same advice for like 7 years, and it's really good advice. And then recently I was hanging out with him, and he goes, "You know what someone just told me?" And he proceeds to tell me the exact thing I've been telling him for 7 years. He's like, "And I did it, and it worked." And in my head, I'm like, "I'm going to punch this guy in the face." But I'm like, actually,
Yeah.
I'm really happy for him. And the reality is that's because someone else with a different voice than me said it in a way that it actually clicked. And your voice matters because your voice might be the only one that finally makes something click for somebody else.
Yeah.
And to me, that's worth all the effort we put to getting that into the world. So get out there and serve people. Remember that your voice matters and it's uniquely powerful in its own way.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank